Hello, welcome. I'm Strangleborn. We went to McKay's the other day and got some books. Now, I think once people caught wind about what McKay's is in my area, whole world started going there, and it's hard to find a lot of good stuff. I got a bunch of fantasy from there. Perhaps I need to go to the one in Knoxville instead of the one in Nashville. It also gave me an opportunity to look for books that I've never heard of. So I kind of wanted to go over what I picked up and then talk about brain candy books or palate cleanser books, because I believe these kinds of books are important to, at least for my reading experience, because I need that break. And we'll go over that in just a minute. Let's go over some of the books that I got. As you've probably heard me say on the channel before, I like fantasy, sci-fi, horror. I think I like horror a little bit more than sci-fi. I do like sci-fi, if it's done right. I've not read any of the big heavy hitters when it comes to sci-fi, other than like the first two of the Hitchhiker's Guide many, many years ago. I know there's some books from like the Sun Eater series from Christopher Rucchio and like Red Rising, things like that. I've not read any of those, and those books are definitely on my radar, but I haven't picked any of them up yet. What I have here are just a handful of books that are going to be sprinkled in between my big TBR reading experiences. And the first one I'm going to show you, Simon R. Green, Something from the Night Side. I don't know anything about this book, and I'll read the blurb when we eventually do read this, but it's just a short book. It's short. I think this was like $1.95. It's like 230 or so pages. Let's see. Yeah, 230 pages exactly. I got book 1 and 4 of Stephen Blackmore's Dead Things. This one gives me big time Dresden File vibes. I like the Dresden Files, and so anything in that vein. This dude's like a necromancer, so it's probably got a lot. It's probably a little bit more dark, but who knows? But it sounded good. And those were like $1.50 a pop at McKay's. I got S.M. Sterling's Dies in the Fire and the Protector's War. Now these are a little bit bigger. By a little bit, I'm talking like 600 pages. It was part of a series. If it's part of a series, I'm more likely to pick it up. I don't know. I'm not really too crazy about one-shots. And I think this one is also part of a series too. I picked up The Ruins from Scott Smith. This was $1.50. $1.50. Or one of the biggest horror books. People give this book loads of praise, and I'm excited about. This is one that's going to be on the TBR for sure. These other books, I may not put them in the jar, but I may just pick them up just to read them because I can, But this one is definitely going on the TBR. The jar is just a decision mechanic, just so you know. I don't have to use the jar every time. Sometimes I just want to be surprised by what I have to read. I can read anything I want to. I've got a pretty big collection of books that need to be knocked out. But Scott Smith's The Ruins is just one of those books that I've heard people on the extreme horror side of booktube talk about being such a phenomenal book, and I'm excited about it. But it's in rough shape. I mean, I think this might be like the very first print or something, because it's just, the pages are yellowed and speckled, and looks like it might have got some water on it at some point in time. But I mean, everything looks good. Everything looks fine. It's just, seen better days. And last but certainly not least, for $12.50, I picked up The Black Tongue Thief. Now, I have seen people on the fantasy side talk about this book, and I'm excited about this. I was amazed that this was there because it came out last year. It's like, who would put this book up? This has praise from Glenn Cook, Brent Weeks, Anthony Ryan, Nicholas Eames, Robin Hobb. So those are the books that I got. Very excited. I always love going and buying books, and I look forward to potentially reviewing these books for you at some point in time. Now we're going to get into brain candy books. These are books I like to read in between reading the big old fat daddy heavy hitters. I actually picked this up from Mike's Book Reviews. He has a video on that, and if I can find it, I will link it below. But these are books that you read in between these big, deep, it doesn't even have to be big, fat, honking fantasy books. There's loads of other books out there that go deep, require a lot of focus. And so I've got some suggestions on some books. I've compiled like a short little, I don't know, we'll call it a presentation. Not really, because I try to stay loosey-goosey and go off the fly, but I really needed notes to discuss with you the importance of having some light reads in between your big reads. Palate cleanser books or brain candy books, it's a treat. They're little treats for your brain to take a break from the big, heavy hitter books that you may read. Your big, heavy themed books may include things like lots of characters, lots of plot twists, sophisticated prose. Small details may matter a lot in these kinds of books. However, on the opposite side, your palate cleanser / brain candy books will usually have a short cast of characters, a lot easier to follow, much simpler prose, smaller details won't matter as much, and they're typically a lot easier to read. And I think while we're on that, I don't think that just because an author may be lesser known or is known for writing easier to read books makes them less of a good author. I'd like to discuss somebody that I discovered. I'd never heard of this person. My wife actually picked this up. This book, reading this book made me want to buy like 4 more or so of this author's books because I really liked it. Now, I wasn't like over the moon going and telling everybody all about it, but I just had a good time, you know? And so now this is my time to really kind of give it praise. This is Ailey Martinez's Monster. This is not the monster with Charlize Theron, you know, going around killing dudes or whatever that one's about. This is a different monster. This is sci-fi fantasy. Ailey Martinez writes a lot of sci-fi fantasy. And I have several of his books on my TBR because this took no time. This book right here is like 315-ish pages. I was going on a kick where I was reading my son to sleep, or attempting to. My son doesn't really sleep that fast, but my wife had mentioned that I have a very soothing voice whenever I read. And I was like, would you like for me to start reading you to sleep as a joke? And she's like, I wouldn't mind it. And so I started reading stuff to her. Like if I was reading at night before she went to bed, I would read to her. And I had finished whatever book it was, I can't remember. But then I went into the living room under the mantle and I picked up Monster. And I was like, this seems like a, pretty simple read, nothing too crazy. And that night, long after she had fallen asleep, I had read like 20-30% of it in just like no time. The characters are super easy to follow. And I was just like, man, and I think I just finished reading like a big book and I was just sucked into this thing. It was nice to just have a break. I highly recommend, if you like sci-fi fantasy, like urban style fantasy, man, Ailey Martinez's Monster is just it's a fun book. I'm not going to sit here and review it. Go look it up online. Monster is like a dog catcher, but instead of catching dogs, he goes and catches baddies that just kind of break free and roam around in the human world. And he ends up meeting some people. There's like no love in this book. I really appreciate that Ailey Martinez did not force some romantic relationship between the two characters, because he would have ruined this book if he did that. And I think he's very aware of it. I would hope so. So good on him for not forcing some kind of romantic relationship between them. There is no romance. Yeah, Monster has a girlfriend. She's a succubus. There is a little bit of sex in it, but it doesn't even go into detail. Highly recommend it. That's my point though. Finding little books that just get you over your, if you're in a reading slump, or if you've read The Eye of the World and you don't want to not read, you just don't want to read something so heavy. You know what I mean? Palate cleanser book can be anything you already enjoy, but on a smaller scale and not as an intense of a read. I made some notes here that say, imagine watching Hereditary, the horror movie, and then watching Fantastic Mr. Fox, or imagine watching The Exorcist and then watching an episode of The Office or Parks and Rec. That's essentially what I'm doing with my book lists. I want something big, heavy, something I can chew on, something that'll pull me into the world, like Gods of the Weirdwood. Malice. I'm reading Malice right now, and I'm finally getting pulled into all these people's lives, and I'm rooting for them, Super good. Let's say my wife was reading a big old heavy daddy book, and after that, she might want to read. This is hers. She picked this up. You like video games? Well, there's BioShock Rapture. It's a book. I didn't know. We saw this at the store. I have no idea how good this is. I've never heard of the author. John Shirley. If you like BioShock, they have a book about BioShock. You can read things that you enjoy and find lighter books in the same realm. Imagine watching Interstellar and then watching Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They're both space themed and they're both sci-fi. One would argue that both of them are heavy. The deeper you get into the book, we start getting into some like philosophical questions and just, I don't know. Douglas Adams has a really unique way of blending his humor with just like deep themes from time to time. Anything can be a palate cleanser. It just depends on what you are into. Now, I know that this would not be considered a palate cleanser. I know this is a heavy book. This is Tender as the Flesh. It is on my TBR. My wife read it. She doesn't think I'm going to like it, and she might be right after what she told me, but I'm still going to try. I'm going to give it a shot. After just a couple things that she said, this is not a light, easy to read, yes, but it's still pretty heavy. I'm putting it on my brain candy list because I want it to springboard me into my next big, deep, heavy book. I want to use that book to make me want to escape into my next big fantasy book, if that makes sense. I've already read Monster. I've not read a good chunk of these, but I've read Dark Matter. This is another Chewy Dogs book brought to you by my Chewy Dogs. Yeah. I've read this one in literally 2 days. I could not put this book down. Golly, boy. This boy can write 330 something pages. Yeah. 2 days. I had this done in 2 days. I really liked this book. It was phenomenal. Boy, it's a good one. It's an amazing book. Blake Crouch. But I also have things like Jurassic Park. I didn't pull everything out on my to be read small pile, my palate cleansers. Just a few. I found this at McKay's, The Beast of Nightfall Lodge. It's supposed to be, I guess, like horror, sci-fi, kind of. I loved the cover. The cover is gnarly. It looks very pulpy. And I was like, this is going to be tight. And there's like 2 or 3 of these, I think. And this Sidor. Sorry, I apologize. I'm not really good with names, but I'm very good at butchering them. Here we go. We got Gil's Off-Right Diner, Ailey Martinez. I'm just giving you ideas about what could be palate cleansers. This is definitely Jim Butcher Stormfront. Great. Here's another book. This is a little bit bigger. Blood and Feathers Rebellion from Lou Morgan. Like, I looked through the beginning here to see if people gave it praise. Nobody in here I know of. I have no clue who any of these people are. I'm checking it out. Legends and Lattes. There you go. Travis Baldry. I've heard that this is cozy fantasy. I've never read cozy fantasy. There's Divine Misfortune, Ailey Martinez. The point of all this is to keep you reading and mix it up a little bit. Variety is the spice of life, they say, and it's good to have variety. You discover things. I have books on this list that from authors I've never heard of before, and I'm excited to see what they have, because you know what? Every huge name started somewhere, and before they were somebody, they were nobodies until somebody discovered them. And I would like to discover some unknown artist and find out that they have like 30 books of the same realm and they're all fantastic, but nobody knows about it. I would love to add stuff like that to my collection. I love discovering. I like finding those little diamonds in the rough. I was amazed at how good Monster was. It's just sitting at McKay's, but I was like, I think it was like $7.99 as retail price. Somebody went and spent $8 on this book, and then I come along and I spend $1. I spend $1 on this book. I read it in a few days, and I love it. And it makes me want to read more of Ailey Martinez's books. All I'm saying is it never hurts to venture out of your comfort zone. And it definitely isn't going to hurt for you to read some books in between your heavily themed books. You are what determines a book's greatness. The author just puts it out there, and it's up to you to read it. If you love it, then you've got a new author that you're going to read. The whole world doesn't have to love them. It just matters if you love them. You determine how you respond to an author's art. And that's all I have to say. Thanks. Have a beautiful day.